So hi, Stephanie. Welcome so much to the group, and I'm so glad
Hello, I'm
you're
so
here.
happy to be here. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, thank you for coming to talk to us. And I'm excited because we've already had a couple of conversations, and so I know a lot of things that I want to ask. And hang on, just let me ask, let those latecomers in. Um, But to just set the tone for everyone, I think that some people knew you, some people have Googled you, but just so that we're all on the same page.
That strikes terror in my heart when I some people have Googled you.
Uh, some people do that regularly. They go, how do
Oh,
I find the
I know. It's me, not you.
book? Okay, so what we're gonna, just so that you know where this conversation is gonna go, what I'm gonna try and get for my writers out of this conversation is that we're always really interested in the paths that our guests have taken, like the journey, so that we can live vicariously and also learn from your experiences. We want to talk about your books, of course, kind of what brought them about, the challenges that were involved in them, but also certain specific aspects of craft I'm interested in. I've read and loved both your books, and I'm dying to ask you about them. And then I also want to talk about something that I think is not unique to us, but unusual, and that is the fact that you uh, and I are both writers, but also both editors and both coaches and mentors, and we do this other aspect of the writing life. And in our very first conversation, um, I realized that even though, we got on like a house on fire, there was so much chemistry there, but you definitely didn't agree with me on some things, and I actually love that. As a lot of people here know, I haven't agreed with my husband for 42 years, and I really, really relish disagreement. So I want to talk to you about some of those aspects as well. But just to give us a frame to this, I thought, well, let us start with the journey because we'll encounter everything else in the course of the journey. And I'm going to start you back to your first kind of brush with the industry. So you were an editorial assistant at Simon& and Schuster, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I started at Simon and Schuster as a baby editor just right out of college, and it was a very different time than it is now, but it was still an industry that was hard to crack. And it was hard to crack on the inside, and it's hard to crack when you're a writer on the outside. So I learned very early how to read, not necessarily for pleasure, but for the market. And I got really good at that. And I went on to work in aspects of publicity and promotion and marketing. And then I became an editor at a trade publishing house called Running Press, which is, I think, still in existence. It's been going for a while. And there I really learned how to work with writers and loved that part of it because when I was at Simon and Schuster, I was mostly doing the bidding of my boss, who is actually a very well-known paperback editor called, her name is Ann Patty. And I'm sure that your students and our colleagues will know the book Flowers in the Attic and
Mhm.
all of the books that were spawned by Flowers in the Attic. And she was the editor while I was her assistant who discovered Flowers in the Attic. So it was a very heady, fun time. And then I kind of fell away from it. It was really hard to break through and to get to the next level and to, I was living in an expensive city, and I was also having a lot of fun. And it was the 80s and late 70s, very early 80s. And, I was kind of just, I'll say distracted. And you'll understand what I mean when you know that it was the early 80s. And it was great. And I don't regret that, but it did sidetrack me from my own work because I was always kind of a secret writer and went on to do many other things, have other careers that were never really, I never really fully inhabited those careers. And then, like so many women, I threw myself into marriage and motherhood and came out the other side, launched my kids, jettisoned the marriage, and thought, well, now is the time. I had a full-time corporate job And I thought, well, now's the time to do this thing that I've always kind of been adjacent to and never really took hold of for myself. And I had tons and tons of writing that I'd never shown anyone, which is now I look back on that and, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I'm not a person who's given to regret, but certainly I wish I had started sooner. And
Wait,
then I
just
started
stop you
writing.
right there. Wait, just
Yeah.
for because before we start talking about the writing, just want to rewind you back to the front before we lose it. You said that it was really hard to break into the industry on both sides of the desk at that time. So just quickly, how did you break in? Like, what did that look like?
So I applied. Somebody told me, I can't remember exactly who, but somebody told me about a young editor who was looking for an assistant. And I had been a lit major, comp lit, and I sent in a resume. It was the olden days, so it was typed, and I had zero experience, but I had this fresh degree, and somehow I managed to sit
Yeah.
in front of her. I don't really know how I got lucky, but I guess I got lucky. And I sat in front of her and we had a lot of chemistry, and we made each other laugh. And I think she was young and also looking to forge a different kind of path.
Mm-hmm.
And I appealed to her sense of irreverence, and we got along very well. And we liked the same kind of books, of course. So
Oh, that's great. And then so then you were a secret writer through this long career and even and through the marriage. And you decided in the middle of, at a time when you had a big corporate career that this was the time
yes.
to put it aside. So I also went through that moment. I remember how scary it was. For you, like what kind of made you think, okay, damn it, this might be insane, but I'm doing it. Well,
Well,
true.
I didn't even say it might be insane. I said this is insane. And I would, you read stories about this and it's sort of like annoying to read, but I actually did wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and write for 2.5 hours and then, walk the dog and go to this very intense corporate job. And then I would come home and read my pages and position myself for the next morning and just do it again and do it again. And I guess I had one draft of the next. And I remember being out I was out with both daughters and at dinner or lunch, I don't remember. And I sort of decided it was time to admit that I was doing this thing. And I said, I'm trying to write this book and it's nothing is ever going to come of it. It's just a hobby, but I'm really trying. I've been spending a lot of time and energy on it. And, they were both super, super supportive. And one of my daughters said, well, if not you, who? And I,
Right.
I don't know why she had that much confidence in me. I certainly did not have that much confidence in myself. And I had a friend who was a well-published writer who encouraged me to send my pages, which nobody had read except me, to her agent. And I did.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I didn't know the agent. It was just, once again, not completely cold, but kind of a cold uh, outreach. And they loved it. And then the story gets a little dark because they loved it, but they pushed that draft back to me 6 times before I actually signed with them. That's before submission,
Right.
publishers. And so I think they believed in the story and they really loved the writing, but structurally, it was not where it had to be. And it's actually interesting years later to think about that because one of the things that I am kind of, semi-notorious for in editorial development is being really good with structure and
Mhm.
helping writers figure out their structure. So I guess I had the fear put in me by those agents who are, by the way, still my agents.
Mhm.
And, they just were very supportive and helpful to me. So I know that agent process, acquiring one and then working with one always seems so daunting or hard to penetrate when you're not in it. But mine were terrific and actually helped me make a book
Mhm.
from a whole bunch of pages that had promise.
Okay, one quick little rewind again. So at what point then did you give up your job? Did you what did you were you in contact with the agents already and did so it was already looking promising and you thought, okay, we're gonna do this. Let's toss
Well,
it.
I was older, first of all, so I was not giving my job up so fast and on the hope that something would happen. So I did not give up my job until after the next was bought by St. Martin's.
Uh-huh.
And I was able to do that for reasons that had nothing to do with publishing. I had other things going on that sort of facilitated a couple of years for me to be able to actually say, okay, I'm going to take this leap.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I did. And, that doesn't mean that I didn't make, big movie money. I didn't write Gone Girl, although I remember distinctly before I finished the next, I read Gone Girl and I thought, you know, I could see what she's doing here. This isn't that hard. And then of course, when I started my own writing and life as a novelist, I thought, boy, was I naive because it's really, really hard. Um, anyway,
So you said that okay, so you kind of posited that maybe you're so strong on structure now as an editor because you had that experience of having your
I think
structure
so.
taken apart. So the second book then, when it went into your agents, didn't elicit any comments on structure. Your structure was pretty tied down.
Yeah, the structure was tied down there. I think it was an easier structure for an editor and readers maybe to digest. In the first book, I moved from first person to third person, so I'm bouncing around a little bit. And that's it was probably risky to do. Frankly, I did not know that. It just felt like the natural thing. I was following my energy versus my intention on
Mhm.
the first book, which is something I talk about with writers a lot, energy and intention. And so I don't think I really even thought about structure for the first novel. It was just kind of, pouring out of me. And luckily for me, my agents recognized that and helped me become much more disciplined about making a professional attempt at structuring a book that would keep readers turning the pages.
So who are your agents?
There's an agency very well known called Jane Rotrosen Agency. And my agents, I have two. I'm very lucky. So it's Meg Ruley and Andrea Cirillo. And they kind of tag team things with me. And, they've just been great. They're helping me. I'm working on a third book now, and it's a kind of a convoluted story, but I pivoted from one novel that was halfway done to a whole different thing. Shirin, I think we talked about this a little bit. I just kind of ran out of gas on the first novel. Well, the first novel that I pivoted from, not my first novel,
Mhm.
but I ran out of gas and I put it down and I just had this other crazy idea that kept nagging at me. And so I started this other idea and 6 months went by and they were like, hello, where are you? Oh, I'm sorry. That's my dog.
That's
Oh,
right.
shush. Okay, thank you. Good job. Good job. Um, they were thinking they were getting one book and they got another book.
Mhm.
So that I am working on that second book right now. And we'll see.
So what I asked was I did notice you using agents plural all the time. So this is interesting to me. I have one other friend who has two agents, and I ask him about it all the time, and I still haven't worked out exactly how does that work. Are they both on every book equally, or do they take different parts? Like does one do, all the negotiation, one do all the editing? Like how are they? how are they tag teaming this?
So I'm not always privy to every single way they manipulate me behind the scenes, but they do a very good job of it. And I think that they read everything and they strategize then how we're going to talk about it, or what recommendations they're going to give to me, or what lists they're assembling and what they're thinking about marketing wise. And they've been extraordinarily helpful with titles and just all kinds of covers and all kinds of little things that sometimes you're kind of bombarded by the publisher and you need a buffer. And so they have been a great buffer for me. And also, not to sound immodest, but they take my perspective on my own work very seriously and they protect it. So
Mm-hmm.
they're great. When I've noticed when letters have gone out in the past on the other two books to publishers, they're both signing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I guess they present themselves as a team in that way. I don't know. I'm sure they work on books separately, but in my case, I was lucky enough to get them both.
And when they communicate with you, it's always together. It's the three of
Yeah.
you on a Zoom,
Yes, on a
three of you on a
yes,
call. Oh,
yes, on a call.
okay.
Yeah, call or
Really
Zoom.
interesting. Uh-huh. So,
Yeah,
so this is well, actually, if I follow this thread, we're going to have leapt right over your second book, which I did want to talk about. So let's back up for a
sure.
second. So then next came out, nice, very nice press and Martin's press, and then lots and lots of accolades. Let's see, we have Library Journal's Best Books of 2016, which was the year that it launched. A novel so startling, original, and so unafraid to approach complicated, bald emotion and anger. A very cunning variation on the revenge fable. And then this one from the Minneapolis Star. The lusty, livid Joanna is the hottest middle-aged dead woman in fiction, which I thought was really, really
Love
funny.
that.
Yeah,
I
but
still love that.
and more, more from Kirkus, more from Booklist, and from the Library Journal, and from Erica Jong. So let us just take a moment to live vicariously through you. So Martin's Press is a press that I think many of us here today would love to have as our publisher. That as beyond getting your dream agents now, you have this like really great publisher. And then the book comes out and there are all these accolades. So how did how did did your agents prepare you for that? Or, you know, were you expecting this? Were they preparing you to not expect too much? Or how did that whole thing hit? And and then my second question, part B of the question, is that after the headiness of all these big reviews, did the sales like kind of live up to it, or was there, because a lot of writers go, oh, this is great, and then right?
Boy, is that those are both great questions. So I was counseled to keep my expectations very, very low. And I am naturally like that anyway. So I just kind of kept it like boxed up a little bit. Of course, I was excited and, it was great. And I was shocked that it was St. Martin's at the time was interested in expanding its literary fiction titles list, which, by the way, here we are 8 years later, and they have now abandoned that idea. So I think they're still, of course, looking for great books, but they're not curating a list as
Mhm.
much as they were at that time. So that's one piece of it. So I really was trying to manage my own expectations and just take things as they came. By the way, I was older at this point. I was 60. So, I had learned that the higher my expectations, the more my disappointment would be. So I was pretty good with that. And then, I'm bemused to report that my book came out exactly this week in 2016, which was 1 week before Donald Trump was elected. So my very first reading of my entire life was at a fancy Brooklyn Heights townhouse of some fancy lady, and people were crying, and not because of how touching my book is. So that, I mean, to the second half of your question, it was not a high time for fiction
Mhm.
because reality was stark and very close,
Mhm.
right? Incredibly close at that time. So I think the book sales of the next have been steady. I mean, it's still in print and, all these years later. And I just did 2 nights ago, I did a 25-woman book group. And they had just read the next. I didn't know them. They just reached out to me cold, and it was lovely and nice to know that that book has legs, obviously. But it was not easy to launch a book at that time. And now here
Right.
we are again, and here we are again, and I am very glad that I am not launching a book this year because
Mhm.
I think, this election will also be certainly a bucket of cold water on fiction for a while.
Right. Yeah. I actually feel, not to depress everyone here, but I actually feel like there's been a bucket of cold water, like you said, since 2016. And but then after that we had COVID, which was like
Yeah.
ice cold water, and
Well,
then
the
now we're
second
back
book
to
came
this.
out, my second book came out during COVID.
So I was going to ask you, and I will ask you actually, about the submission process. So both were next came out at a very particularly bad time, but we're going to guess that it got acquired maybe 18 months before that, which might not have been such a bad time. But
Right.
certainly your second book, acquisitions happened at a very cool point in the market. So what was that experience like? And I think that, it always helps my writers to know w- how tough it can be and how in the end you can still get your book. So tell us, tell us what that was like.
Yeah, so Algonquin was a very different beast, much smaller house, much more intimate experience, very loving and, really high touch experience for me. My editorial notes from St. Martin were like a paragraph, and I was a debut author. I was like, there has to be more, you know. I was really nervous. I was very nervous about that. But Algonquin, I had a venerated, famous editor, and he was great. He's retired. And I would say that they didn't have the firepower of St. Martin's, but they had the attention span,
Mhm.
which, when I was coming up, when I started this conversation about being an editor at Pocketbooks at Simon and Schuster, and the lifespan of a launched book was a year. Now it's 6, 8 weeks.
Mhm.
And so once you publish, you're kind of in and out, and a lot falls on the author now, where that was not the case in the past.
Mhm.
And so I was happy to be at Algonquin because even though, again, it didn't have the firepower of St. Martin's, it was a much more considered process, a longer process, just a kinder, friendlier experience for me. I know
Right.
I was not unhappy at St. Martin, by the way, but it just was not a good time for them, I think. And so I
Yeah.
think that my move to Algonquin, it was a tough decision to make, but the right decision.
Right. Yeah, and I also agree, I think that a lot of times writers think that the bigger the press, the better it's going to be for me. And I know that from of my books, I've published with HarperCollins and with Harcourt, but the best experience I had was actually with Chronicle Books. So the
Yes.
same thing,
Right.
very high touch, much
Right.
smaller team, much kinder experience.
Right.
Um, Not the firepower, but I think they more than made up for it by how dedicated they were. I
Yeah.
certainly felt that I got a lot more support and more marketing push than I did at the bigger publishers.
Yeah. I mean, just to, make sure I'm showing another side. Not every I by the time I submitted and Carry the Dog was bought, I did not have a big corporate job anymore. And so, the firepower of St. Martin's was also something that helped me have income.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Algonquin was a different thing. So there's a trade-off, and not everybody can afford to just cruise for a couple of years and write. So you're hoping that you have an income from that thing you just did blood, sweat, and tears for 2 years, 5 years. And so I think this has been a issue and a challenge endemic to publishing, certainly since I was a young girl, that, the more money you have, the more able you are to sustain yourself in your writing endeavor. And
Right.
that's not a happy thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. And also, having been a publisher myself of a very small press, it's I mean, I'm talking about publishing, but actually applies across the board in life, right?
Sure.
It's like the game just changes. The options you have just keep changing the more money you have.
That's right.
Before we all get totally depressed, but we'll go back
Well,
to the
the good news is, there's nothing I'd rather be doing. So,
right.
you know,
And the great news is, I think that Algonquin, despite being smaller and having less firepower, like got you some
really,
totally great launch, right? You've got
yeah,
People, you were in People magazine, witty, startling, astute, book list, an irresistible character. Good Morning America's 15 books to curl up with this November. That must have been huge.
huge.
So a big plug for, smaller publishers who work maybe
Yeah, yeah,
a different way, but get the same result.
definitely.
Kirkus publishes weekly forward reviews. The
LA Times was a rave.
LA Times was raised, book list was raised. You did really, really well. And so actually, how does it feel does it actually make you nervous about the next book? Do you have do you have do you have imposter syndrome at all? It's like, oh my God, they keep saying these great things about me. When will they
I
find?
think if I were younger, I would have imposter syndrome, but I really, this is going to sound maybe disingenuous, but I really am doing it now for the love of it. And, my editorial work is something I love so much, and I have a good balance of my days, and I have, friends and family who are supporting me through all this. And uh, I'm trying, not that I don't, but I'm trying not to worry about anything except the task at hand at my desk every day.
Mhm.
And, I'm not getting ahead of myself. I did submit 100 pages to my agents and got some feedback. Actually, I think when we first spoke, I had just gotten this kind of not, not exactly chilling feedback, but it was not feedback. It was feedback that was a little more feedbacky than I expected. Um, and so I've been working on resolving some of the issues that came up for them. And, I don't think about it as anymore as, oh my God, am I going to do it? Am I going to do it? I think about what are the problems of the novel? What are the story issues and challenges? Who are these characters and what situations? I'm really immersed in the work, and
Mhm.
I try not to think anymore about everything else out there.
Well, that's a great way to be. And
I've earned it. It didn't come easy.
and so that's a I want to actually, I was gonna like segue into your editing because you mentioned it, but before we get there, I want to talk to you about craft. So to me, reading your two novels, it seemed like they had like some similarities across the books. I mean, they're very different books, and the voice I thought was definitely like there was definitely a shift in the voice, although it was kind of like the same author's voice. I know that sounds
Yeah.
complicated, but if you read the two books, you guys, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yes, yes.
But that you both the books were really interesting to me, and that they there was like a lack of of the standard romantic love in either book, right? Which was so interesting because that romantic relationship was still so powerful. And then what I really enjoyed was that there was very powerful love in other forms, which I think is fantastic and which you so rarely encounter, or you rarely encounter enough of in literature, I think, right? The fact that love can be so powerful in all these other forms. And one of those forms that is common to both books is kind of like the mother-daughter relationship for both the good and the bad of those relationships. Found that very interesting. Um, I thought the whole thing was characterized, both books were characterized by this feeling of there being some very dark truths being spoken about. And I thought that I was maybe, when I wrote the invitation to this, I was reading your second novel first, and I found some parts of Carrie the Dog so incredibly wry and funny and irreverent, and I couldn't believe you just said that and put it down in black and white. All these, all these thoughts that you have as an aging, as I won't say an aging one, but a woman getting more mature, as a maturing woman, you have these
Yeah.
thoughts and you kind of very rarely even encounter them unless you're four of your best girlfriends over a few glasses of wine, and here they were in
Yeah,
black and white.
sure.
I loved that. But the first book, the next, that kind of darkness was cut by how offbeat your premise was. I thought that was such an unusual way to get at it. And so I wanted to start there. I wanted to ask you how, as a debut author, you decided to write basically through the eyes of a dead person, and a very, very flawed dead person at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, hmm. Yes, a flawed dead person. So I think also in Carrie the Dog, that character is also very flawed
Hmm.
on purpose because who isn't? Um, so for the next, I really, in my own, the next is a lot of, there's a lot of me in the book, more than in Carrie the Dog. And in my own life, not, this is now TMI, but I have historically not been a person who gets angry a lot. And a lot of things had happened along the way in life, as they do, that certainly I was entitled to be a little bit angry about. And I think I killed off that protagonist so that she could rage on. I did not sit down with that intention, but that is how it happened. And this was actually before Lincoln and the Bardo, there were not, and then came a little bit of a cascade of more ghost stories. But so even my agents were like, this is a little bit of a tricky sell because it is dark, but it's also funny and it's sexy, but she's dead.
Hmm.
So it was, I can't say that I engineered that novel or that plot. It was a lot of energy, and then I went back and embedded intention, but I don't know, it seemed to just fly. The pages flew for me as a writer, and the pages flew for readers. So I mean, the accolades the next gets still. See, I was in the book group, so I had to remind myself of a lot of things. Sorry about my
Hmm.
flags, but it's a book about a woman who dies and comes back and haunts her ex, which I love this cover, love it. Um, and I was mad about a lot of things, not just that ex, all exes, and all kinds of things. And
Right.
I just let myself be angry on the page in a way that I actually had not ever been in real life.
Right. And you can feel it. I mean, the energy I mean, it's so much energy in that book.
Yeah.
And so and and I think though that this
Oh,
is
can I just say one more thing to kind of
yes,
balance
of
that
course.
out? The mother-daughter part of that book. Of course, it's a story about the revenge story and the ghost story, but it really is, as you pointed out, a mother-daughter book. And I was very keen to write something super sentimental and loving that wasn't hokey and corny. And I wasn't sure that was even possible because it seems very hard to do. And I hadn't really read a lot of things that were very from the heart, that weren't kind of falling into maybe something that I don't love to read, which is something a little too sentimental. So I worked really hard to try to find a way to make it super loving and open and touching. And, I hope I did. My daughters think I did, which is the point.
Yeah. That's interesting because one of the things that I thought was so interesting about the book is that through a long part of the first section, I found that protagonist so obsessive and so cold to her daughters that uh, that if she was on stage just all by herself, I would have, as an editor, what I would have said is that you might have pushed it too far here because
Yeah.
there's so little that's redeeming about her.
Yeah,
Why do I want to stay with this character? But then
right.
you have Lainey, right? And you can't, which I don't know, like you said, it was just energy and wasn't intention, but that was genius. That was the genius of energy because you can't really walk away from Lainey. You don't want to abandon Lainey. You kind of feel like and so that splitting that from your Lainey is by no means the primary protagonist, but she plays that really important role that is usually assigned to the primary protagonist of keeping you there and keeping you
Oh,
too
absolutely.
emotionally involved to walk away. Yeah.
As does the dog.
As does the dog. And I was gonna say, you have certain echoes in your books. The love of dogs is in both of them. The love of music, the
Yes.
very strong sense of love of art or the aesthetic. In one, it's music and photography and
Yeah.
editing. The love of editing actually finds its way onto the page as well. So yeah, really, really kind of like interesting echoes, but for me, for sure that that the character of Lainey, and how that kind of how she manages to anchor what could otherwise be oh, this is like too hot for me to touch thing,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and with B in so this is the protagonist of the second novel, is I find a much more approachable protagonist, but she's also kind of anchored in some ways, like rescued by the love of a daughter figure, even though it's not her real daughter. So that part, I think you did a great job. Like if you were hoping to be kind of heart-warming, heart-touching without being maudlin. I think you did that really well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's something I think about a lot.
Um, and now I've gone into my rant about your protagonist. I was gonna ask you, so then from that you moved to your second novel, and you so how many years were in between those? About five from memory?
16, 21. Well, probably 3 years writing and then 18 months of publishing whatever they're all doing. So on 5. And now I'm at 21 and 5. I have another year. I hope to submit at the beginning of this coming January. So maybe it'll be the exact same amount of time if it gets published in 26.
So so as you came out of your first book, both my sister and I are authors, and both of us have talked about how when you've got your first book, you just want to get published. It's like that's the goal. And then as soon as that book is out, you're like, oh no, what if I'm a one one hit wonder. And I was thinking,
Absolutely.
now I need to publish the second one to like prove that I wasn't a one hit wonder. And then the second one gets published. And you, so I'm wondering, like, for you, the sequencing as it goes along, you say that now you have learned how to just enjoy the process and just
Yes.
focus on what you're doing. What was it like writing the second book though? Was it, was it scary? Did you already know what you wanted to write when when you had your first book in?
Well, you pointed out earlier, I was always fascinated with how photography and rock and roll came up at the same time, really. And I'm a boomer, so I came up at that same time too. And so that always fascinated me. And I had been reading a lot. Always loved Sally Mann, and I'd gone to a Diane Arbus exhibition, and I wanted to kind of marry rock and roll and Gary Going and photography in Miri and kind of play with that and have it be not from my life, as a lot of the next was, but really just, falling into fiction
Mhm.
rather than autobiographical fiction. And so those subjects interested me tremendously. I have journals from when I was a kid, and I would look back and there was so much music. And I think I always secretly wanted to be a lyricist and, never pursued it. In fact, there's a song in Carry the Dog, the song that is stolen from B, and she never gets any money for it. But it's her song, and it's a big hit for the band. And I lifted that exact song from my 22-year-old self's journal. This
Oh, that's great.
went in completely intact, and I was sure it was going to get cut by some editor along the way, and it didn't. Stayed in. So, I just had a love of the topic. Now, the complicated family relationship is where I really had to dig, because it's absolutely unlike my family relationship, which was exceedingly normal. And but I was, intrigued by, first of all, Diane Arbus was in a lifelong relationship with Howard Nemerov, her brother. Howard Nemerov, the poet, is Diane Arbus's brother. And they were like a couple, weirdly. And I always loved Sally Mann's photography, and I wanted to understand what it was like to be an artist mother and use your children, and what would tip that over into exploitation, which I don't think Sally Mann did. But so all of these things were swirling around for me. And a good friend of mine who's a very well-known writer said to me, I was casting around for my idea. I had a bunch of different ideas. And she said, well, you should write about what you always think about. And weirdly, I do always think about rock and roll.
Mhm.
And I am always seeing art. I live in New York, and I can just walk to everything. And so those are the things I think about. And that's kind of what happened.
So how did it happen though, in the sense that we were talking a little earlier about energy versus intent? And so did you start writing? I mean, you knew that these things were interesting, but did you have like the premise in mind? Did you have the beginning and the end, but not the middle? Like, did you plot? Did you not plot at all? Did you go from one
So
side?
for the next, I really was just sitting and, feeling the flow and the muse and all that jazz. But for Carry the Dog, I learned from really just tr completely immersing myself in craft books. I'd gone to a workshop, but it wasn't exactly the right speed for me, or the time it was running wasn't right. Anyway, I kind of was teaching myself to follow my energy in the sense of writing, instead of locking myself into chapter and the next thing and a chronology. I decided to just think about scenes that captivated me, that I wanted to write. So I would put up an index card, which I still do, and I'm pointing because I'm looking at my index cards right now. And I would write a scene. And I tried to unleash myself from the idea of forcing a chronology on something that I didn't know what it was quite yet. And I let myself discover what it was. And that was extremely liberating for me. And also in a way gave me, it just provided me with a lot of freedom to write scenes first. I think with the next, the first thing I got about the next was the first line. I understood the first line kind of unlocked the whole thing for me. And again, I was following my energy. And Carry the Dog, I knew I had some themes I wanted to hit. So it was a little more strategic. And then the index cards and the scene writing became tactical. And that is how I approached this, my third novel, and I have another one too. So my two third novels, whichever one survives, we'll see.
Written.
Um,
But going back for a second, so when you were writing in scenes, though, at what point? So as the reader, for this reader's experience, it's like I'm going along. It's very complex and very interesting from the beginning. I think one of your great strengths is, and I was trying to describe this to some writers the other day who hadn't read your work yet, but I think they have by now, was that a lot of authors, kind of walk you down into a pool, right? Like this. And with you, I kind of felt like I kind of took two steps and then whoa, like you're deep in both novels so quickly and
that
like
I love that.
yeah, it was very, very powerful. But it makes me wonder because when the reader's experience is like that, it feels as if everything is already there, right? It's so complex, and yet in Carry the Dog, towards the end, and they accumulated very quickly, I'd be like, oh shit, as I started to get things, I go, oh shit, and then oh my God, and and so
Meaning what? Meaning the dots started
the
connecting?
dots started
Yeah,
connecting.
yeah, yeah,
I started to see things that
yeah, yeah,
when I saw them, I could look back and see where they,
yeah.
but so for me though, writing that way, um, I'm really interested in at what point did you know that your dots were going to connect up to be that picture? Like
That's a
when did you
really,
know that
really
that
good question.
family
I
was
did
going to be
not
that
know
family?
that. I did not know that until maybe the second revision.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's
Then
interesting.
I went in and purposely started connecting dots. And sometimes that meant moving things around. And sometimes it meant deepening a character who I thought was a secondary or tertiary character. And then that character took on more weight, like Bix is
Hmm.
an example. Um, so I did not get there. I didn't plan to connect all those dots. I mean, I wish I mean, I think I'm pretty smart, but that would have been at the outset, that would have not been possible for me. But I did see it later. And in revision, it was when I probably in the first revision, I started to see where I could make the puzzle pieces fit in a 3D way.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then in the second revision, because I think there were two on this one, is when I really started to mastermind it.
At the
Quote
end
Taylor
of your
Swift.
first draft, though, how much of, I don't want to give this book away for people who haven't finished reading it yet,
Yeah.
but how much of what we come to understand was the real situation? How much of that was there at the end of the first draft?
I mean, I can give you a percentage, 60%. I will tell you that on Carry the Dog, this is a little inside secret. I submitted the book to, and I mean, I had a contract and the book was bought and I submitted my final draft after the editorial notes were attended to, and I changed the ending and I did not tell anyone I changed the ending. It was too neat. It was a very neat ending. and I don't want to give it away, but the current ending is open, and anything can happen, and not all relationships are resolved. And in fact, the last three words of the book are, I just got a little emotional, are very important to me. And that came to me after it was fully edited and approved. And then I made the change because it was just too neat. And by the way, no one even noticed. Well, no, I mean the editor, no one, I don't know if he didn't notice, but he did not, he was happy with it. So
Right. So this is okay. I'm going to just take 8 more minutes and then I'm going to hand over to everybody else. But this is a chance to segue into the differences between you and I, or not
yeah.
in some of our approaches to mentoring and to editing. Um, you had said, and I now think I understand why, that you try and convince your writers not to think about the publishing, all the what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what they want, what they don't want too early. Whereas most of the people here will have seen me stand up and say, if you want to publish a book, to kind of like know where you're going with it from the beginning, um, can be to your advantage. So, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to hold anything too tightly and have like advice and theories that I don't shift, because I am continuing to learn. I think it's, certainly one of the things I like about myself is that I am continuing to learn. But I will say that I work with writers from absolutely people with an idea and nothing on the page, to writers whose names who have finished books and have written 10 books and are still struggling with the same struggles, on book number 11. And it has been my experience that the concentration on story is the path to allowing yourself to shape the book for a wider readership. And I do not, when I say wider readership, I don't mean agents and publishers, I mean readers. And so I'm constantly trying to encourage my writers to think about the reader, think about the reader, think about the story you love to read. And so I have a deep appreciation for figuring out where your internal storyteller is and trying to listen to that. And I'm not sure that I could successfully do that if I was worrying about a query letter. A query letter is something that I would begin to worry about once I was very clear on the strength of my story. And so I do think it's a process and steps, and I try to move through this almost like I have almost like a project management approach to trying to unearth and then track that creativity. I think there's a former mentee of mine on the call who will probably attest to that, I have a very deep respect for creative process and story. And I don't think that the publishing landscape is friendly to that,
Mhm,
especially for writers who are just starting out.
mhm. What do you think in that context of people who have been trying to break down what story is for writers, like the beat sheets and Save the Cats and all those people like that out there.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you think they hurt? Do you think they hinder, or do you think they help?
I'm going to give an answer that's going to sound dodgy, but I mean it. It's like you kind of have to know yourself enough to cherry pick what of all those things works for you. I started at late, and I came out of a corporate environment, and I had a, big deal job, and I learned about project management. So I tried to bring some of that structured day and discipline to novel writing. And I've told this story so many times, you can see this on YouTube, but when I first started writing the next, I bought like a stack this high of craft books. And every time I found something useful in the craft book, I would be like, okay, and I would take that and apply it to my work. And if I found things that didn't resonate with me, I tossed it aside. And I've also said this, so I'm sorry if people have heard this before from me, but I learned the most important thing I learned from all these craft books was that every time I got to a challenge in the work, it wasn't a Stephanie problem. It was a writer problem. And I didn't realize that. I thought that, oh, I'm not good enough. I've written myself into a corner. The chronology's off, or the structure, or the voice, or the dialogue. And I learned from all the craft books that Stephen King hits that same wall 45 pages in. And that was incredibly empowering for me to think, okay, this is the job. It's not just me not knowing how to do the job. This is the job. It's excavating and figuring it out and finding a path and then moving down that path. And, that is certainly how I mentor and work with editorial clients. So you can probably see why story becomes so important for me, because I'm always trying to help people excavate the real story. I don't think I've ever heard myself say that, and I like it.
Well, you're being recorded, so if you want to hear
Okay.
it, you can.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but okay.
All right. Well, I think that is a great point for me to turn over to the room so that they can ask their questions. And I just wanted to know one last thing was that you're unusual in that you mentor for BookEnds, and that's a year-long mentorship, right? So you're
Well, January to May.
oh, January to May. Okay,
Well,
sorry.
December to May. Yeah.
So do you just a quick little question then? Like, do you
Sure.
find that the way you interact with a writer as a div editor, the way that you do it as a long-term writing coach, and the way that you do it as, December to May mentorship, like, does it change your how you engage? Does it change what you bring to the, not so much what you bring to the table, you're always bringing yourself, but what you present or what you
I
focus
mean, yes and no. I do a really deep forensics dive into a manuscript, and it's a very intense, intimate process between a writer and an editor, which is the way it used to be, right? In the olden days, it was this kind of intense, communing about the work. So I think I bring that to my editorial work. And coaching is a little bit different, because coaching means there's a lot more hand-holding in coaching about how to set up a writing practice. And, then there's book doctoring, where somebody really wants not just a good forensics editorial letter, but actually wants you to stay with them while they're revising. So there are many ways that I work. And I mean, I try to adapt myself to the writer. I think we're all so different, and it's such a tender business. And I started late and I learned late, but I learned fast. And I think something that maybe something that I bring a little bit extra to the table is that just like the writer, I want to figure out how to make it happen. I don't want to do this for 10 years on your book, like let's have a plan, and I do hold writers accountable. But again, it's a tender business. And so I try to navigate and manage around the writer's needs.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Lovely. I love a tender business. I like that a lot.
it really is. And I feel it too as a writer. So
Yeah,
I know what it's like.
for sure. So this is the tiger editor talking to the tender business here on the ends of the pole. But so show of hands, everyone, if you have a question, and first come, first serve, you'll come float to the top of my screen. I have no takers at this moment.
I
Deborah?
probably said too much.
I don't think so. Deborah, we'll start with you. So I'm going to add Deborah in here with us.
Hi.
Hi. I have, when I got the notice of your appearing on this Zoom, I went and got copies of both your books and I've plowed through them quickly.
Wow.
I read slowly, so plow is the wrong word, but for me it's plowing because I read very
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Deborah? What a bad timing.
slowly. But they're both amazing.
Thank you.
In the next, when you are just it says my connection is unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Um, I keep coming back to the question of your descriptions of the ghost when she's doing all these amazing things that I'm trying to imagine as I'm reading. How did you write that? How did you
Drunk.
write those
I was
scenes?
drunk. No.
That's actually what I was wondering. Did you have any clinical help there?
No, I write at 7 in the morning, so definitely not. I don't know. I just, closed my eyes and pictured what I want it to be. I mean, if you're a writer, you probably feel your work in your body. I mean, I always encourage writers to slow down and feel what they feel in the body as they're putting the words on the page. And I just kind of embodied that rage as best I could and then visualized it.
Well, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Thank you.
All the times you did it, it was like, wow.
Thank you. It was fun to write. The next was really fun.
Thanks, Deborah.
This never read anything good. Thank you.
So here's Julie.
Hi.
Hi, Stephanie. How you going?
I'm
I'm doing in Australia, so it's a bit early for me. But anyway,
Oh, wow. Yeah, very.
but I wanted to ask you, with your experience as being an editor for other people, how hard was it to edit your own material?
I think there's a point for every writer where you stop being able to see it.
Hmm.
And so that's but again, as I said a little bit earlier, that's a phase that we all go through. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah.
And so I put it aside and then I go back to it kind of cold, but not to toot my own horn, but I've gotten very, very good at being merciless with myself. And it's only the third. I have friends who've written, 11 books, but I know what I'm trying to accomplish now. I'm not trying to figure out what I'm trying to accomplish. So by the time I'm in editing phase, I'm just like, I no longer protect anything. As we all do, I keep stuff I'm pulling out in a file and I go back to it or not. But I'm pretty disciplined about cutting and moving.
Yeah. Do you recommend putting it away for a while before
yeah.
looking at it? Yeah, that's what
That's
I'm
really
just,
hard. By the way,
yeah.
that's hard to do. It's really hard to do, but it's so necessary, absolutely for me. And I think it's probably a good practice for most writers.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Lita. Oops, where did you go? Here you go.
Here, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. This is so I actually have not read the next yet, but Shirin recommended it to me, probably because I am writing a book with a ghost character. And she's dysfunctional. This is a really specific question. And I just so I sort of set these rules for myself about how the ghost operates. And I was really proud of myself. I'm like, I have these rules. I won't break them. But then, I'm also finding that, and I strongly believe that even if the, supernatural isn't real, that like there has to be an existing set of parameters. But I'm also finding that this set of rules is limiting me. But then on the other hand, I'm worried about using the supernatural as a crutch, like, oh, she can do anything because she's a ghost, right? So I guess this is not a really coherent question, but does it sound did you have any of these kind of experiences? And I haven't read your book yet.
Definitely. I had to figure out what I call a ghost taxonomy. Like, what is this thing, and what can she do and what can she not do? So absolutely. In fact, it was one of the trickiest bits for me because I didn't want it to be, I was worried that it would be sort of like silly. I wasn't trying to write like Casper the Friendly Ghost or, some silly or Ghostbusters. I was writing something very serious, and it was about female rage. And that was the avatar. The ghost was the avatar of that. And so I spent a lot of time. In fact, I probably have half a notebook filled with, I read a lot. I read Neil Gaiman. And, of course, we haven't talked much about reading on this call, but, reading is imperative. So every single thing you need to know about ghosts, you're going to have to figure out how other people are handling it, and then pick what feels right for your character. But yes, absolutely. And I love hearing that because I actually worked on a novel a little while ago with a ghost character, and the writer was resisting having rules. And I don't remember if I talked him into it. We'll see I'm going to do a second pass soon, so we'll see if he took my advice.
Thank you. That's great to hear. I'm like,
yeah.
oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I thought having a ghost
definitely.
Because then, but no.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lita. And Francis, I believe you have a question. Hang on.
I do. I've been searching for the raised hand icon. Thanks for spotting me.
Hi.
Yes, in fact, Monia told me.
So I'm well into Carry the Dog, which I'm really, really enjoying. And I want to know about the choice you made to use the present tense, which I think is tricky. But I think you've been really effective at it. And so if you can comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a choice, and it is tricky. I think writing in the third person omniscient is, in a way, gives you much more latitude, because you have to stay you're in close first person, there's nowhere to go. But I wanted this character's flaws and mistakes and bad decisions to be happening in real time, in a sense, so that the reader was feeling the weight of those mistakes. And in fact, the reader had a sense of foreboding. Now what's she going to do next? And so, it was a lot of work. The book I'm writing now is also in that very immediate first person, very present. In that, if you make that choice, you also have to be very mindful of how you deploy backstory, right? Because you can't just tell backstory as if it's third person with knowing everything or properly connecting or interpreting events. You have to still be in that first person head of your blind spots or your overinterpretation, or, you're still bringing the flaws of the present to what you experienced in the past. So yeah, it's tricky.
Did you start off with that?
Yeah. Yes, I started off with it. I was scared, but once you find, are you working on something in the first person?
No, but that's the one point of view, the first person present, that I've struggled with the most. So I usually stay away because I don't know about when you use the past tense and then getting confused and sliding in. It's a lot of work for me. Yeah. So I didn't know if it came naturally to you. You made that decision.
I don't know if this makes you feel better, but a lot of people struggle with POV and tenses. And it's almost something that this might help you if you think about it as something you can fix in line editing later. So don't get too caught up in, oh my God, I made a mistake in the last paragraph, they went and now they're going. I really try to encourage myself and also writers to just keep going and then fix it later when you start to understand where you want to be. and are most comfortable, then you kind of go back and retrofit. But it isn't not an easy tense to inhabit. And another problem with it is I don't want, it's not me. I have to be that character when I'm writing, right? And that isn't me. Certainly I wasn't dead in the next. I don't think. And so it's tricky because you don't want it to sound like author voice. You want it to be the character, and you want it to be as alive and dynamic as possible. So it just takes a bit of a tuning in your inner ear, sort of.
Well, I haven't read Next yet. So both are from that first
Well,
person
Next
present?
has a mix of
okay.
very present, crazy first person. And in the next, it's a little crazy. And then third person.
I'll be sure to read it. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for the question.
Thanks,
It's a good question. It's a good question.
Dorothy, you're up next.
Hi, Dorothy.
You're on mute.
There we go. Took me a while to find the mute button. Thank you for making time for us tonight. And at the beginning of your talk, you were talking about how you had all these pages and you'd never shared them with anybody. So what is your point of view on critique partners? Do you think it would be helpful to share pages early on? Or
I don't
do you
even
prefer
know
to hold it
what is
close?
that? What is I don't know what a critique partner is.
Oh, well, in my case, I have two women that I work with. One's a
Okay.
former journalist and one's a
okay.
former
Okay, understood.
neuropsychologist. So, and we're all women of a certain age,
Yeah.
doing our last chance strive to be authors. But we share things early on, like first draft stuff.
Yeah.
We'll have weekly conference calls and we share pages and we critique them.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's helpful, I think it is. But
Yeah.
I was just wondering, do you still hold everything close? Because sometimes I feel like I get too reactive to other people's comments and then I make all these changes and overwrite. And then I go back and I go, what have I done?
Yeah.
So what is your perspective on that?
I mean, I just have to be completely honest and say, for me, it would not work, especially early pages, because it takes away my sense of play and discovery and being loose and relaxed. I just want it to be me and the pages for a long time. And when I work with writers, I can always tell, and I'm not bragging, I can always tell a piece of a manuscript that's been workshopped.
Yeah.
And the reason I can tell is not because it's not even a negative, it's just a fact. It is incremental. And it feels like discrete elements because nobody yet has read the whole thing.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And so it's not yet a fully integrated story. And that's okay. It'll get there as well as if they weren't in the workshop. Everybody has their different processes. So a critique partner would not work for me. The word critique would scare the hell out of me. No, I don't want critique. But again, you have to do what feels good and works for you. Also, I will say, having community is as important as me not wanting critique, because I have writer friends and I depend on them. It's a little bit different. We talk about it more theoretically than actually handing pages back and forth. But so that need for support and community is 100% true and real. So if it's working, great.
Well, we'll see if it works. There's a proof in the pudding, right?
Are you writing a novel? Are you writing?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And I'm actually almost finished with the first draft. I'm cleaning up a few scenes. It's about 70,000 words, literary fiction.
Great.
And so we'll see. We haven't gotten the query yet.
Yeah.
I think that just to pop in here that and having worked with many writers groups, and I think that it is a challenge to be able to know what you take and what you don't take.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of wanting to be open enough that you're not just, it's not a defensive posture. It's not, not
Yeah.
anymore here. I'm not listening to it. You want to be open because we're all blind. Like even if we've been writing for years and years and books,
Definitely.
you're still blind. But you also want to know when you're being pushed off balance, when
Yeah.
you're being pushed into somebody else's conception of what your story should be rather than your conception of what your story should be. But that's gonna last you till the end of the process. You're gonna go down to the sixth edit with your the same editor who wrote you a big check for the manuscript, and there'll be a point where they want it to be like this and you want it to be like that. And so yeah.
Yeah, it's also
Yeah.
a confidence. It's a confidence thing where you can hear feedback and know that there's something in what the person is telling you, but it may not be exactly what the person is telling you. But it brings your attention to that spot. And you kind of know that in your own way, with your own confident drive, that you've got to deal with this spot for some reason. So
Thanks, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Julie, you're up next.
Well, first, I want to know, how do you get that confident drive? But then second, I was actually wondering if you could tell us a little more about writing with energy versus intention, and sort of what drafts you seem to shift between those, like how that moves between the drafts.
yeah, I'm going to not answer the first question.
That's okay.
I'll just jump right to the second question. Energy and intention are vital, right? You need both. Energy is kind of when you're in your flow. And I hesitate to use that word because it's misinterpreted and it's kind of a fuzzy word for me. But it's when you're sitting there and you're typing away and you love where you're going and it feels right and it feels good and this scene is working and it's teeing up the next thing, and all the synapses are firing on the page and in your brain. And then intention is, again, almost a function that works really well in revision, but once you get a lot of practice or some practice pulling together the world of a novel, you can sort of front load with intention. But intention is actually pulling the strings of what you want the reader to experience. So you're not just writing your great sentences, you're writing your great sentences with the intention of evoking something in a reader. And that becomes power. And it's why so many writers, including me, love revision, because you can really start to make the sentences move in a way that brings the reader to where you want the reader to go. So that's why I often, not always, but sometimes start out with writers forcing them, they all hate it, but I kind of insist on it, making them do a mission statement for what they want the book to do. Not a synopsis, not a pitch, not a query, what you want that book to achieve for yourself and for a reader. And so that mission statement is a way for you to keep intention in the forefront. Because all of the writers I work with, well, not all of them, but most of them are very good writers. But it's how do you harness that energy and professionalize it in a sense so that you are leading the reader, so that you are the boss in complete control of the narrative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that, because you have in one case almost the story driving itself and the characters leading you, and then the other, with the other hat on, you're thinking about, how am I actually shaping this and where is this going to go?
Exactly.
Kind of like that, the advice to have it would be for you the mission statement, but sort of like the goal in front of you as you're working, like whatever the theme is, or whatever the point is, or something like that, so that you keep coming back to it.
That's right. And I would say, again, not to sound dodgy, but it's not the same for every writer, right? Like some writers will do an entire draft that's just, in fact, I'm working with one now, that's just pure energy. And he's such a good writer that I myself am getting dazzled by the sentences, but where is the structure and where is the story? And the plot points are buried and the narrative isn't clear. So he has to embed now, go back, and he's totally on board. He has to go back and figure out how to embed intention into this great energetic forward momentum of a crazy novel that he's got about it. The novel's about AI.
Timely. Yeah.
Yeah, very.
Well, thank you, Julie.
Well, thank you.
So Monica, you have the last question of the night, and then we're going to draw prizes.
Okay.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
This
for
has
having
been
me.
really interesting. So I'm, you said that Next was a book that was started out as energy and that your editors helped you to kind of bring the structure together. And I haven't read the whole thing. I'm halfway through. But I'm writing a novel in stories. And there's some and Improvement by Joan Silber, which I just read.
Sure. Yeah.
The structure of Next makes me think of that. And I just wonder if you
I'll take that as a high compliment.
Oh, well, I liked Next too.
Thank
And
you.
I loved Improvement.
Me too.
Yeah. But so I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about sort of the difference between, I mean, is Next a novel? Is it a novel in stories? I don't think it is, but just to talk a little bit about that structure, form, and how to create a structure when each of the characters is sort of distinct and you're really in their point of view for a brief period and then you move on to another point of view, because that structure was really interesting to me.
So I have a very practical answer to that.
Oh, good.
After I wrote the first draft and then the second draft and the third draft, and the agents kept saying, not quite there, not quite there. And I was getting frustrated and thinking, okay, not quite there. I'm not sure what to do. So what I did was I printed out the whole thing and I separated the two stories and I laid them out on the floor. The first person pages and chapters, and then underneath that, the third person omniscient pages and chapters. And I put them together, I stacked them up, and I read them each discreetly to see if the story held without the integrated other POV. And then I worked on making sure that that was the case, that both those stories could be read separately and understood. And then I went back and I started to look at the ends of every chapter and the beginning of the next chapter to make sure that I was leading, even though it was a different voice, that I was leading the reader in a common sense way, I guess is the way I'd put it, to the next thing that was happening, the next scene or the next chapter, the next voice that was coming at them. And that's how I did it. I was extremely, again, I was telling Shirin earlier, I'm sitting here today all day cutting with a scissor and taping in my current novel. And that's what I did with that book, is that I had to figure out, make sure that the two storylines were woven properly. And that is really what unlocked it for me. And then I had a successful draft. Is that a good answer?
That's a brilliant answer, except that it's depressing me because it means I have to do it. All right.
It's super helpful.
I think it will be. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Monica. So we're almost at time. So I'm going to now draw names for we're going to start with the 3 lucky winners for Stephanie's first page critiques. That scary word critique again, but now we know how valuable it's
As
going to
long
be.
as it's not me being critiqued, I'm okay.
Okay, so first, you guys can't see my hands, I realize. So you're just going to have to take it for granted that I'm honest. First person, Julie Sullivan. Julie, can you show us your book? Ah, you weren't prepared to win. All right, big tick. Second name drawn, Deborah Trotta. Deborah, can we see the book? Oops, I can't see Deborah at all.
She
Oh,
just showed both of them.
two books.
Yeah.
Oh.
I have the other one also. It's on Kindle. Just putting that out there.
Okay, you only get to win once, those little ladies. And the third person is I only have an email address because that's the way Squarespace spins it out. So I don't know who this is. Strong145629. Can you put your hand up? Does anyone here own Strong145629? No? No? Well, what do they say? Have to be present to win. So draw again. Oops, that's right. This one is JulieRD100 @gmail. I believe it's
That's me, Julie Randolph Davis.
excellent. All right. So
Okay.
I'm going to put the 3 of you in touch with Stephanie at some point after this. Yay. I know. No for 2 Julies. And we'll move on now to the draw for Lori. Lori, do you want to, let me just pin Lori up here while I'm doing this so that seeing as I'm drawing for her edit. Hi, Lori. Lori, this is Stephanie. Stephanie, this is Lori, another one of my editor friends.
Hello, Stephanie. This has
Nice
been
enough to
amazing.
yes, nice enough to contribute some edits. So we're gonna it's so fascinating. All right. So Lori edits go to the first one drawn is Linky. Who is Linky? Is Linky here? No? No Linky? All right. Dorothy 411. Dorothy here? Yes?
Let me show you my book.
Yes, please.
And I stopped.
I love this having to show the book thing. It's a little Hunger Games, but
There you go. It's an ebook.
Okay, great. Okay, so Dorothy is the first.
I'm so excited.
Can't believe this. Strong 145629 got drawn twice but isn't here to win. What? She's gonna watch the recording and be very, very disappointed. So next one drawn is Monica McKinney. Monica, I know you're here, right? I can't see everybody, so actually, maybe I should have put us all in gallery view. So take your mic off and just tell me that you're here before I pull the next person.
Oh, yeah, I'm here, and here's my book. It's I'm listening to the audio book.
Great. And then
Great. Excited.
the third one is CAA 5959. CAA 5959 here? No? Take your mic off and say if you're here. Nope. leaderren@gmail.com.
Oh, good. I don't know Lori at all and couldn't have texted her. Yay, here's my book though. Yay.
Yay, Lita.
Okay, and now the drawer, the me coming out of retirement. Yeah, see. All right, and first winner is Valerie Levitt at yahoo.com. Is Valerie here? Do you see Valerie, Lori? Because yeah. Can you see the book?
Here. And she's on her way to showing, yes, there's the book. We have a winner.
What, Lori? We have a winner. Julie has already been called.
I just figured out how to unmute me. Thank you so much. And I am loving Carrie the dog. It's fabulous.
Great. And I know there has to be an easier way for me to do this, really.
I was saying thank you, but I was on mute. Sorry.
Okay. Number 2 is keep drawing the same people who aren't here. Number 2 is Caitlin. Caitlin Quinn. Yay, Caitlin!
Yay. Hold on. The book was up on my screen.
You better have that book, Caitlin.
I'll say.
Of course I do. And Stephanie. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Caitlin, I think you've certainly had enough edits from me.
Well, I had to share the wealth. I wasn't going to put my name in.
Yeah.
Caitlin's had some comments from me too, but maybe not written down on paper.
I've never had a real edit, Pro.
Yeah,
so
you haven't had a real edit. That's
I'm
right.
going to brave the tiger.
Oh, gosh, Julie, you came up again.
Why did she get entered more than once?
Well, if you had been reading your newsletter, you would know that you get. Okay, is Ned here? You get rolled into in again. Ned here? Poop. That's a disappointment because Ned usually always comes and never gets drawn.
He was here.
I know. A bunch of people had to leave early because we were running just a little bit long. My bad. Oh, Siska Brower. Siska's here for sure, right? Hi, Siska.
I am here, but my book hasn't arrived yet.
Oh,
I got a shipping update today, so I'm sorry. I don't have it yet.
okay. Can you show me the shipping update?
From in my email? Sure. Can I send it to you? I don't want to hold everyone up with
Yeah, no, you can send it to me because I'll take proof of purchase before I give you the edit. I trust you.
Okay. I will send it to you, but it may just have been delivered. But thank you so much for this great session.
You're very welcome. And we all have to thank Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie, for being such a good guest.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was really fun.